When I first held that baby in my arms, I didn't know who she truly was. I only knew she had my daughter's eyes, and something about the way she cried made my heart ache in ways I couldn't name. That night, as I rocked her to sleep in the dim hospital light, I told myself she was just another grandchild. A blessing, even if she'd come sooner than expected. But deep down, something didn't feel right. There was a tremor beneath the peace. And when the truth finally surfaced, it broke something inside me that I'm still learning to live without. I used to think I understood what family meant. I was 36 when I married Henry, a widower with a gentle heart and a teenage son named Marcus. Henry was the kind of man who spoke softly and fixed things around the house without ever being asked. His hands were rough, but his touch was steady. At that time, my own daughter, Layla, was 14, shy, bookish, always humming songs to herself as she helped me fold laundry. When our two households joined, I was determined to make it work. People like to say that love is enough, but when you're blending families, love has to stretch. It has to make room for grief, for boundaries, for old habits that don't quite fit under one roof. Still, for a while, it was peaceful. Our small house buzzed with new energy, the smell of Henry's coffee in the morning, Layla's laughter echoing through the hallway, Marcus's music playing too loud from his room. I'd often find them sitting together at the kitchen counter, sharing snacks or teasing each other about school. To me, they looked like siblings who had simply found each other later in life. Marcus was quiet, thoughtful in a way that made you wonder what went on behind his eyes. He'd lost his mother young, and there was a sadness to him that time didn't quite erase. But he was polite, responsible, almost protective of Layla. Once, when Layla fell off her bike, Marcus carried her home. Her knees were bleeding, and he kept saying, "Don't cry, little sis. I've got you." I remember watching them from the porch that day, thinking, God gave me a good son. Henry worked long hours at the factory, and I spent most of my time managing a small bakery in town. Life had its rhythm, ordinary, repetitive, comforting. We ate dinner together most nights. Simple meals, chicken stew, cornbread, sometimes just rice and beans. Layla would set the table while Marcus handled the dishes. We laughed a lot. We talked about grades, birthdays, plans for the future. I thought we were happy. I believed we were happy. And for many years, that illusion held. By the time Layla turned 18, she was blossoming, all confidence and light. She'd gotten into a community college a few towns over, studying early childhood education. Marcus, now 22, worked as a mechanic and still lived with us for a while, saving money for his own place. They were close, maybe too close, I see that now. But at the time, I saw nothing but friendship. Sometimes, when Layla came home from class, she and Marcus would sit on the back porch, talking for hours. I'd glance through the kitchen window, smiling to myself. It's good, I'd tell Henry. They get along so well. Not all blended families do. Henry would nod, proud. We did something right, Mary. We believed that. We wanted to. Then came the small changes, the quiet ones you only notice when it's too late. Layla stopped bringing friends home. She started locking her bedroom door. She'd blush easily when Marcus walked into the room. I brushed it off as teenage shyness. Marcus, too, became distant. He'd avoid family dinners, claiming late shifts at work. His usual easy smile faded. I'd ask Henry, "Do you think something's wrong?" He'd shrug, pouring himself another cup of coffee. "They're just growing up. Don't worry so much." But mothers notice things. We always do. One evening, I found Layla crying in her room. She tried to hide it, wiping her face quickly when I walked in. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing, Mom. Just tired." Her voice trembled, but I didn't push. Sometimes love makes you afraid to ask the hard questions. I told myself it was just school stress. I told myself I was imagining things. And so life carried on, quietly, uneasily. Then one morning, Marcus packed up and left. No warning, no goodbye. He said he'd found an apartment near work. Henry didn't question it much. He's a man now, he said. He needs his space. But Layla didn't take it well. She was pale, withdrawn, as if something vital had been ripped away. I found her sitting on the porch that night, staring into the dark. He'll still come around, I said, sitting beside her. She nodded, but didn't answer. And in that silence, I felt something shift, a heaviness settling between us, quiet and unspoken. A year passed before the next storm came. Layla finished college and took a part-time job at a daycare. She seemed stable again, even happy. I started to believe that whatever had troubled her was behind us. Then, one night, she came to me trembling, holding a small white stick in her hand. "Mom," she whispered, "I'm pregnant." The room spun. I wanted to be angry, but all I could see was the fear in her eyes, the same fear I'd seen in her when she was little and got lost in the grocery store. I took her hand. "Okay," I said softly. "We'll get through this. Who's the father?" She looked at me, tears spilling down her face. Her silence told me more than words ever could. That was the first time I felt the ground beneath my life begin to crumble. And I didn't even know yet how deep the cracks went.
After that night, the world felt smaller. Our house, once full of laughter and the smell of cinnamon bread from my oven, turned into a place of whispers and half-finished sentences. Layla didn't talk much after her confession. She avoided eye contact, spent long hours in her room, and barely touched her food. I tried to keep things normal, tried to keep her from falling apart, but I could feel the fear radiating off her like heat. Henry, bless him, didn't know yet. I wanted to tell him, but every time I tried, my throat tightened. He'd already raised one child who wasn't his by blood, my daughter, and now here she was, pregnant and alone. I told myself the right thing to do was wait until I had all the facts. But that waiting became its own kind of torment. 2 weeks later, I finally gathered the courage. We were sitting at the dinner table, just the two of us. Henry was reading the newspaper, the faint sound of the clock ticking behind him. "Henry," I said, my voice low, "I need to tell you something." He lowered the paper slowly, his kind eyes curious. "What is it, Mary?" I took a deep breath. "It's Layla. She's pregnant." He froze, his expression unreadable. Then he sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Oh, Mary. She's scared," I said quickly. "She doesn't want to tell anyone yet. She wouldn't even say who the father is." Henry nodded slowly, his voice steady but distant. "We'll handle it. She's young, but she'll be fine. We'll help her." And that was that. He didn't press for names, didn't get angry. Just quiet acceptance. But beneath that calm, something flickered, a question he didn't want to ask. The next morning, I found Layla in the kitchen, staring at her phone. Her eyes were swollen, like she hadn't slept. "Morning, sweetheart," I said gently. "Did you eat anything?" She shook her head. "I'm not hungry." Her phone buzzed then, and she jumped, panicked, like a child caught stealing cookies. She turned the screen away before I could see. "Layla," I said softly, "you can talk to me." "I can't," she whispered, voice trembling. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." She looked up, eyes shining with unshed tears. "I made a mistake, Mom. A big one." "Everyone makes mistakes," I said. "But you don't have to face it alone." She hesitated, her lips parting like she wanted to say something, but then she shook her head and walked away. The sound of her footsteps down the hall felt heavier than thunder.
The weeks that followed were a blur of doctor visits, whispered calls, and quiet tears. Layla told the clinic staff the father wasn't involved. That should have been the end of it. But something about her sadness clung to me. One night, while she was asleep, I walked into her room to drop off some laundry. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message flashed across the screen before it dimmed again. "Marcus, are you okay? I can help. Please don't shut me out." My blood ran cold. I stared at the phone, my heart pounding in my ears. Marcus. Why would he be texting her about this? I tried to tell myself it was just concern. Maybe he was being supportive, like a brother. After all, they'd grown up together. He probably just wanted to help. But deep down, something ugly whispered, "No, Mary. Not this time." I didn't tell Henry about the message. I didn't know what to say, and I didn't want to believe what my mind was beginning to piece together. Instead, I started watching. Listening. Layla's eyes would flicker toward her phone when Marcus's name appeared. Her whole body softened at the sound of his texts, a warmth that shouldn't have been there. Then came the night she went missing for hours. She told me she was meeting a friend from work, but when she returned, her cheeks were red, her hands trembling. I asked where she'd been. She mumbled, "Nowhere," and went straight to her room. Later that night, I walked past her door and heard her crying softly. Between the sobs, she whispered a name. Marcus. I stood frozen, my hand against the wall to steady myself. My chest tightened so hard it hurt to breathe. For a long moment, I just stood there, the world tilting, spinning, collapsing under the weight of that single word. The next day, I called Marcus. He didn't answer. I tried again later that evening. Still nothing. Finally, I sent him a message. "Marcus, it's Mary. Please call me when you can." A few hours passed before my phone buzzed. "Marcus, hey, sorry, been busy. Everything okay?" "Me, I need to see you. It's important." "Marcus, can it wait?" "Me, no." After a pause, he replied. "Tomorrow night. I'll come by." That night, I barely slept. My mind was a reel of every memory, the bike accident, the way he used to call her, "little sis," the way she'd light up when he walked into a room. How had I missed it? How had I not seen what was growing right under my roof? By morning, my stomach was tight, my hands cold. When Marcus finally came, I met him at the porch. He looked tired, older somehow, with dark circles under his eyes. "Mary," he said softly, "what's wrong?" I took a deep breath. "Sit down." He hesitated, then nodded and sat on the porch steps. "I need you to be honest with me," I said. "About Layla." He stiffened instantly. "What about her?" "She's pregnant." His face went pale. His lips parted like he wanted to speak, but no sound came. And that was all I needed to know. I sank onto the step beside him, my voice barely a whisper. "It's yours, isn't it?" His shoulders slumped. For a long time, he said nothing, just stared at the ground, his hands trembling. Finally, he whispered, "I didn't mean for it to happen." The sound that came out of me wasn't quite a gasp or a cry, just a sharp, broken exhale. "How long?" I asked. 2 years. 2 years, I repeated, my throat dry. "You lived under my roof. You called her your sister." Tears welled in his eyes. "I know. I know how it looks, but it wasn't like that. We didn't plan it. We tried to stop. But we..." I stood up, cutting him off. Don't you dare try to make it sound like love." He buried his face in his hands. "I'm sorry." The wind moved through the trees, carrying the faint hum of the highway. The world was still, yet everything inside me was shattering. When I finally spoke again, my voice was calm, eerily calm. "You need to leave. And you will not go near her again until I say so. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. Please, Mary, don't tell Dad. I turned away. Go. And without another word, he left. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at the photo of our blended family on the mantel, for smiling faces that meant everything to me once. And for the first time, I realized that sometimes the people you love the most can destroy you without meaning to. I didn't tell Henry right away. How could I? How do you look your husband in the eyes and say, your son and my daughter have a child together? No language exists for that kind of truth. It sits inside you like a stone, heavy, cold, impossible to move. The next few days were a blur. I went to work, baked bread, smiled at customers, came home, cooked dinner, all on autopilot. But inside, I was splintering. Layla noticed something was off. She'd look at me sometimes with worried eyes, as if she could sense the shift but didn't know its shape. And Marcus, he didn't call again. Not once. Maybe he thought silence was mercy. But silence can be the cruelest confession of all. One evening, as I was folding laundry in the living room, Layla came in quietly. Her belly was just beginning to show, small but undeniable. Mom, she said softly, can we talk? I looked up. Her voice was too steady, too careful. Of course, I said, motioning to the couch. She sat down beside me, her hands clenched in her lap. You've been distant. Did I do something wrong? I opened my mouth, but no sound came. For a moment, I almost lied, almost told her I was just tired, that everything was fine. But something inside me broke open. Layla, I whispered, who's the father? Her eyes filled instantly. Mom, please. I didn't move, didn't soften. Tell me the truth. She looked down, her voice trembling. You already know, don't you? The words hit like a slap. My hands went numb. So it's true, I said. Marcus. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. It wasn't supposed to happen. We didn't mean to fall in love. Love? The word came out sharper than I intended. You grew up together, Layla. You called him your brother. He's not my brother by blood, she said, her voice breaking. You and Dad, you made us a family on paper, but it wasn't the same for us. He was kind to me when no one else was. He understood me. And after a while. She trailed off, covering her face with her hands. I didn't know how to stop. I stood, pacing the room. Do you have any idea what you've done? The shame this will bring? The pain it will cause your father? Her shoulders shook. I know. I know, and I hate myself for it. For a moment, the only sound was her crying, raw, desperate, the kind that scrapes your throat on the way out. I sat down beside her and took her hand, my voice barely above a whisper. Where is he now? She swallowed hard. He said he needed time to think. Think? I repeated bitterly. He's been thinking for 2 years, hasn't he? She didn't answer. I pressed my fingers to my temple, trying to steady my breath. Does Henry know? Her eyes widened. No. Please, Mom. You can't tell him. It would destroy him. I looked at her, my daughter, the child I had carried and loved through every storm. And all I could see was the wreckage left behind by choices she couldn't take back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed beside Henry, watching the faint rise and fall of his chest in the dark. He still snored softly, still reached for me in his sleep the way he always did. He had no idea that the life we built, the home, the trust, the laughter, was already in ruins. At dawn, I slipped out of bed and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photo of Marcus and Layla on the fridge, smiling, carefree, innocent. The clock ticked softly. The world was the same, and yet nothing was. By morning, I knew I couldn't carry it alone anymore. Secrets are like rot, they spread until everything you love starts to decay. When Henry came down for breakfast, I poured him coffee, my hands shaking so much that a few drops splashed onto the table. He looked at me curiously. "You okay, Mary? You look pale." I sat across from him, clutching my mug. "There's something you need to know." He frowned. "What is it?" "It's about Marcus and Layla." He blinked, confused. "What about them?" I took a deep breath. "Layla's pregnant. And Marcus. Marcus is the father." The room went silent. Henry just stared at me, like he couldn't process the words. His jaw tightened, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "What did you say?" "You heard me," I whispered. He pushed back from the table, standing abruptly. "That's not funny, Mary. It's not a joke." His eyes filled with disbelief. They're brother and sister." "Not by blood," I said quickly, but the words felt hollow. He paced the kitchen, running a hand over his head. "I raised them under one roof. I taught them to call each other family. And you're telling me," he stopped, voice cracking. "You're telling me my son betrayed me like this?" I felt tears prick my eyes. "I'm sorry, Henry. I didn't want to believe it either. But it's true." He slammed his fist on the counter, the sound echoing through the house. "Where is he? Henry. Where is he, Mary?" "He's gone. I told him to leave." Henry turned toward the door, fury burning in his eyes. "I'll find him." "Please don't," I said quickly. "You'll only make it worse." He stopped, his voice trembling. "Worse? How could it possibly be worse?" I didn't have an answer. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. I can't look at either of them right now." I stood there helpless, watching the man I loved crumble under the weight of a truth he never deserved. For days, Henry barely spoke. He went to work, came home, ate in silence. He avoided Layla completely. The tension in the house was suffocating. Layla, guilt-stricken, tried to apologize, but he refused to look at her. One night, I found her outside on the porch, crying quietly into her hands. "Mom," she whispered, "does he hate me?" "No," I said softly. "He's just broken." She nodded, eyes red. "I deserve it." "No one deserves this," I said. "But we still have to live with it." Weeks later, the baby was born, a little girl with soft brown curls and eyes that mirrored both her parents. When I first held her, I felt a storm of emotions: love, sorrow, shame, forgiveness, all tangled together. Henry refused to come to the hospital. He couldn't bear to see the child. But I went. I sat beside Layla as she held her daughter, her face pale but glowing. "Her name is Hope," she whispered. I almost laughed through my tears. "Hope," I repeated softly. "That's fitting. Because even in the wreckage of our lives, something pure had been born." That night, as I watched that tiny baby sleep, I realized something profound. Life doesn't always give you what's right. Sometimes, it just gives you what is, and you have to find the grace to survive it. He paced the kitchen, running a hand over his head. "I raised them under one roof. I taught them to call each other family. And you're telling me," he stopped, voice cracking. "You're telling me my son betrayed me like this?" I felt tears prick my eyes. "I'm sorry, Henry. I didn't want to believe it either. But it's true." He slammed his fist on the counter, the sound echoing through the house. "Where is he? Henry. Where is he, Mary?" "He's gone." I told him to leave. Henry turned toward the door, fury burning in his eyes. I'll find him. Please don't, I said quickly. You'll only make it worse. He stopped, his voice trembling. Worse? How could it possibly be worse? I didn't have an answer. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. I can't look at either of them right now. I stood there helpless, watching the man I loved crumble under the weight of a truth he never deserved. For days, Henry barely spoke. He went to work, came home, ate in silence. He avoided Layla completely. The tension in the house was suffocating. Layla, guilt-stricken, tried to apologize, but he refused to look at her. One night, I found her outside on the porch, crying quietly into her hands. Mom, she whispered, does he hate me? No, I said softly. He's just broken. She nodded, eyes red. I deserve it. No one deserves this, I said. But we still have to live with it. Weeks later, the baby was born, a little girl with soft brown curls and eyes that mirrored both her parents. When I first held her, I felt a storm of emotions, love, sorrow, shame, forgiveness, all tangled together. Henry refused to come to the hospital. He couldn't bear to see the child. But I went. I sat beside Layla as she held her daughter, her face pale but glowing. Her name is Hope, she whispered. I almost laughed through my tears. Hope, I repeated softly. That's fitting. Because even in the wreckage of our lives, something pure had been born. That night, as I watched that tiny baby sleep, I realized something profound. Life doesn't always give you what's right. Sometimes, it just gives you what is, and you have to find the grace to survive it. Henry didn't say a word for almost a week after the baby was born. He slept on the couch, barely looked at me, and when he did, his eyes held a kind of grief I'd never seen before, the kind that made you understand silence could be louder than shouting. Every sound in that house carried tension, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the fridge, even the way the clock ticked seemed cruel. Layla stayed in her room, caring for baby Hope with trembling hands. The house smelled faintly of formula and lavender lotion, but beneath that was something heavier, guilt. One morning, I found Henry sitting on the porch, coffee untouched in his hands, staring at nothing. You should go see her, I said quietly. He shook his head. I can't, Mary. Not yet. Every time I think of Marcus, his voice cracked. He was my boy. My whole purpose after his mother died. I taught him right from wrong. I gave him everything. And he stopped, gripping his cup so tightly I thought it would shatter. He destroyed this family, he whispered. I sat beside him. He didn't destroy it alone. He looked at me sharply, but I held his gaze. They're both to blame. But that baby, she didn't ask for any of this. She's innocent. Henry's eyes softened, but only slightly. I know. I just don't know how to forgive. Then don't, I said gently. Not yet. Just start with seeing her. It took another 3 days before he finally did. Layla was sitting in the rocking chair, humming softly to Hope, when Henry appeared in the doorway. She froze when she saw him. Dad, she whispered. Henry's voice was rough. Can I see her? Layla's eyes filled instantly. Of course. She handed him the baby, hesitant, trembling, and for a moment, time seemed to hold its breath. Henry looked down at Hope, the baby's small hand curling around his finger. His shoulders sagged, and tears slipped down his face before he could stop them. She's beautiful, he said quietly. Layla nodded, sobbing. I'm so sorry, Dad. I never meant to hurt you. Henry wiped his face, voice breaking. You didn't just hurt me, Layla. You broke something I don't know how to fix. She bowed her head. I know. He looked at me then, eyes wet. What do we do now? And for the first time since it all began, I didn't have an answer. 2 weeks later, Marcus came back. He showed up unannounced one evening just as the sun was setting, a silhouette at the gate, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. Henry saw him first through the window. His jaw clenched. I'll handle this, he said, standing up. Before I could stop him, he was already outside. I followed quietly, staying near the door. Marcus looked thinner, older, his eyes red-rimmed. Dad, he started, voice low. Henry's face hardened. Don't call me that. Marcus flinched. Please. I know what I did was wrong. I've been trying to figure out how to make it right. There is no right, Henry said coldly. You had every chance to tell the truth, and instead, you lied. You hid. You made us believe this family meant something to you. It did, Marcus said desperately. You do. All of you. I love her. I love them both. Henry's voice rose, trembling with rage. Love? You think love justifies this? Marcus shook his head. No. I can't undo it, Dad. All I can do is take responsibility. Henry stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. You don't deserve to be anywhere near that child. Marcus swallowed hard. I'm still her father. Henry's hand balled into a fist. Then be man enough to stay away so she can grow up without your shame hanging over her. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Finally, I spoke. Enough. They both turned toward me. Henry, I said quietly, anger won't build anything. It'll just keep us burning. He glared at me. And what do you suggest, Mary? We pretend it never happened? No, I said firmly. We face it. We decide what comes next, not out of fury, but out of love for that child. Marcus looked at me, voice trembling. I'll do whatever you think is right. I studied him, this boy I'd helped raise, who'd grown into a man haunted by his own mistakes. I saw the guilt in his eyes, the desperation to be forgiven. Then start by helping, not hiding, I said. Layla needs support, and that baby deserves 2 parents who don't make their shame her burden. Henry looked at me in disbelief. You're letting him stay? I shook my head. No. But I'm not banishing him either. He'll contribute, he'll visit under my terms, not as punishment, but because that child needs to know where she came from. We can't erase this, Henry. We can only live through it. Henry turned away, breathing heavily. Marcus nodded slowly. Thank you, Mary. Don't thank me, I said softly. Just do better. That night, Henry and I argued for the first time in years. He accused me of being too forgiving, too calm. I accused him of being too proud, too angry. We yelled, we cried, and by the end of it, we sat in silence, 2 people bound by love and loss, staring at the pieces of a life we no longer recognized. He finally said, voice breaking, You're stronger than me, Mary. No, I whispered. I just learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means deciding not to carry the fire anymore. Months passed. Slowly, painfully, the wounds began to scar over. Marcus found work in another town but visited every few weeks, always bringing diapers, formula, or tiny dresses for Hope. He never stayed long, just enough to see her, to hold her, to cry quietly when he thought no one was looking. Layla started therapy. She and I spent long evenings talking, not about blame, but about responsibility. Henry, though still distant, began to soften. I'd catch him sometimes watching Layla and Hope from the window, a sad smile tugging at his lips. She looks like him, he said once. She looks like both of them, I replied. He nodded. Maybe that's not all bad. One evening, we had dinner together for the first time in months, all of us. Layla, Marcus, Henry, me, and baby Hope in her high chair, babbling happily. No one mentioned the past. We didn't have to. It hung there quietly between us, but for the first time, it didn't feel suffocating. When Hope laughed, we all looked at her, and somehow, in that sound, there was something like grace. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood by the window, the moonlight soft against the glass. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who believed love could be simple, that family could be fixed with enough kindness. That woman was gone. But in her place stood someone quieter, steadier, someone who knew that love isn't about perfection. It's about endurance. Because sometimes, surviving together is the bravest kind of love there is. It started quietly, as things in small towns always do. At first, it was just a glance too long at the grocery store, a conversation that stopped when I walked past. Then came the murmurs, the whispers that slithered through the church pews like smoke. Did you hear? They say her daughter's baby is her step-grandchild. Lord have mercy. People didn't need the whole story. They only needed a piece of it to build their own. By the end of that month, everyone in town had their version, and none of them were kind. Layla stopped going out entirely. She'd go from the nursery to her room and nowhere else. Even the sound of the mail truck made her flinch. One afternoon, I found her crying in the laundry room, clutching a pile of Hope's clothes. "Mom," she sobbed, "they look at me like I'm some kind of monster. I can't even buy diapers without someone whispering." I took the tiny onesie from her trembling hands and folded it gently. "Let them talk," I said softly. "They'll move on to someone else soon enough." But the truth was, I wasn't so sure. People like to think gossip is harmless, but it can bury you alive if you're not careful. Henry didn't handle it well either. He'd stopped going to the diner where he'd eaten breakfast every morning for 10 years. His co-workers said nothing to his face, but I could see the way their eyes lingered when he walked into the factory cafeteria. Once, he came home early, slammed his lunchbox on the counter, and said quietly, "They're calling me the man who raised sinners." I tried to reach for him, but he stepped back. "Don't," he said. "I just need time." So, I gave him time. I gave him space. And in that space, I carried all the weight he couldn't. One Sunday, I decided to go to church alone. I could feel every pair of eyes follow me as I walked down the aisle, each one pretending to be focused on their hymn book. The air felt heavy, judgment thick as incense. When Pastor Green started his sermon on forgiveness and the limits of grace, I knew it wasn't coincidence. His voice echoed through the sanctuary. Sometimes, sin enters a home not through strangers, but through the ones we love most. A few people nodded solemnly. A few looked straight at me. I sat perfectly still, back straight, eyes fixed on the pulpit. I refused to flinch. When service ended, one of the deacon's wives approached me. She smiled, that kind of brittle, pitying smile people wear when they want to feel superior while pretending to be kind. "Mary," she said sweetly, "we've been praying for your family. I can't imagine the shame you must feel." I met her eyes calmly. "Thank you," I said. "We don't feel shame anymore. We feel love, the kind that survives the fire." Her smile faltered. I walked away before she could recover. That night, I came home to find Layla sitting on the porch with Hope in her lap, the baby cooing softly against her chest. "Mom," she said quietly, "maybe we should move. Start fresh somewhere." I sat beside her. "Running won't change what happened, Layla. People forget faster than they forgive, but they do forget eventually. You just have to outlast them." She looked at me, her eyes tired. "How do you do that?" By remembering that what they think isn't the truth. What we do next, that's what matters. Hope stirred then, her small hand curling around Layla's finger. The sight of it made something inside me settle, not peace, exactly, but a kind of fragile acceptance. A few weeks later, Henry did something I never expected. He came home from work early, cleaned up, and said, "We're all going to dinner." Layla looked startled. "All of us?" "All of us," he said firmly. "Including the baby." When we walked into the small diner downtown, the room fell silent. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Forks clinked against plates. Henry didn't even blink. He walked straight to our usual booth, pulled out a chair for me, and said, "Sit, Mary." We ordered burgers and fries like any other family. Hope giggled when Henry made faces at her, and for the first time in months, Layla laughed, a real laugh, small but bright. When the waitress finally came over, she smiled nervously and said, "It's good to see you folks again." Henry nodded. "It's good to be back." And that was that. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't triumphant, it was quiet defiance. Sometimes, that's the strongest kind. The whispers didn't stop overnight. But slowly, the tone changed. People who'd once avoided us began offering small nods in public. A few even stopped by the bakery, pretending they'd just been craving pie. Marcus started sending money regularly, and Layla found work at the daycare again. Henry began smiling more, though sometimes I'd still catch him staring off, lost in thought. Life didn't return to normal, it simply found a new version of it. One evening, months later, Pastor Green stopped by the bakery. He cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mary, I wanted to say. I may have spoken too harshly in my sermon." I looked up from kneading dough, wiping flour from my hands. "You spoke the truth as you saw it," I said calmly. He nodded, shame in his eyes. Still, I judged without knowing the whole story. "I'm sorry." I smiled faintly. "That's all any of us can do, see clearer when the fog lifts." He nodded again. "You've handled this with grace." "Not everyone could have." I shrugged. "Grace isn't something you find, Pastor. It's something you choose." When he left, I stood by the window for a while, watching the sunset spill across the sky in shades of gold and rose. The street was quiet, the town still. I thought about all the noise, the gossip, the judgment, the whispers, and how, in the end, none of it had destroyed us. We'd survived the story people told about us by living our own truth louder. That night, as I tucked Hope into her crib, I whispered a prayer. Not for forgiveness, we'd already found that. But for understanding. Because if there's one thing I'd learned, it's that life doesn't always follow the rules we think it should. Sometimes love is messy. Sometimes family is broken in ways you can't fix. But there's beauty, even in the wreckage, if you have the courage to keep looking. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges. Seasons passed, and the town that once whispered about us began to speak of other things. Babies were born, people passed away, and gossip, like wind, changed direction. Our lives didn't go back to the way they were, they grew around the scars, like vines curling around broken wood. Henry and I grew quieter. We didn't talk much about what happened anymore, but it lingered, like the faint scent of smoke long after a fire has gone out. Sometimes, we'd sit on the porch in the evenings, watching Hope play in the yard. She was 3 now, bright, curious, her laughter the kind that healed more than time ever could. "Looks like she's got your stubborn streak," Henry would say, smiling faintly. "And your eyes," I'd reply. We'd share a small laugh then, both knowing it wasn't true, but saying it anyway. Some lies are too kind to correct. Layla had rebuilt her life slowly. She went back to school part-time, started volunteering at a community center for young mothers. "If I can help even one girl feel less alone," she told me one night, then maybe all this pain meant something. I watched her speak to those women with quiet confidence, steady, grounded, gentle. There was something sacred in how she used her own story, not for pity, but for purpose. Henry came to one of her workshops once. He stood in the back, arms crossed, watching her speak. She didn't notice him until the very end. When she did, she froze. But then, slowly, she smiled. And for the first time in years, Henry smiled back. It wasn't forgiveness in that moment, not yet, but it was the beginning of it. As for Marcus, he kept his distance, as I asked him to. He called every month, sent money for Hope, and always asked, "How's she doing?" I'd tell him about her, how she was learning to write her name, how she loved strawberry ice cream, how she'd started calling the bakery Grandma's Cake House. He'd always laugh softly. "Tell her I love her." "I will," I'd say. But I never told Hope who he really was. Not yet. Some truths have to wait until hearts are ready to bear them. One Sunday, 4 years after everything broke, Henry and I took Hope to the park. The air smelled of cut grass and rain. She ran ahead of us, chasing butterflies, her little curls bouncing in the sunlight. "Do you ever think we did the right thing?" Henry asked quietly, watching her. "What do you mean?" "Keeping them apart. Letting Marcus stay away." I thought for a moment. "I think we did the best thing we could, and that has to be enough." He nodded slowly, eyes on Hope. "She deserves a better story than the one we gave her." I smiled faintly. "She'll write her own." That night, after Hope fell asleep, I found myself standing in front of the old family photo again, the one from years ago, before everything fell apart. 4 smiling faces. 4 people who thought love alone could hold a family together. I didn't take it down anymore. It wasn't a reminder of what we lost, it was proof of what we survived. In time, even the quiet between Henry and me became comfortable again. We'd weathered the kind of storm most couples wouldn't survive. There were still cracks, yes, but light seeped through them now instead of bitterness. One evening, as I closed the bakery, Henry stopped by. He leaned against the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching me sweep. "You ever think about moving?" he asked. "Sometimes," I said. "But this place, it's home, Henry. It's where we fell apart, and where we learned how to live again." He nodded, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "You always know how to say the right thing." I chuckled. "No, I just know how to listen." A few months later, Marcus called. His voice sounded steadier, lighter somehow. "I'm getting married," he said. For a moment, I didn't speak. Then I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "I'm glad, Marcus." "Truly." "She knows everything," he added quickly. "About the past. About Hope." I didn't want to hide anymore. "That's good," I said softly. "You can't build a future on silence." He paused, then asked quietly, "Do you think Dad would ever talk to me again?" I hesitated. "He already does, in small ways. When he watches Hope, when he talks about forgiveness. Give him time." He exhaled shakily. "I miss you all." "We miss you too," I said. "And we're proud of you, son." I hadn't called him that in years. The word felt strange and right all at once. The following spring, we received a letter in the mail. It was from Marcus, no envelope, just a folded page written in neat, careful handwriting. It said, "Mom, I know I can never undo what I did, but I want you to know I've spent every day since trying to be a man who deserves forgiveness. I hope one day Hope will know the truth, not to hate me, but to see that people can change. Thank you for never giving up on us. Marcus." I read it 3 times before handing it to Henry. He read it in silence, then folded it neatly and tucked it into his wallet. "I'll keep it," he said simply. and I knew that meant something had healed. Years later, when Hope turned 10, she found an old photo album in the attic, the one with our blended family pictures. "Grandma," she asked, pointing to Marcus, "who's this?" I smiled. "That's someone who loved you before you were even born." She grinned. "He looks like me." "Yes," I whispered, "he does." And that was enough for now. That night, after Hope went to bed, I sat on the porch alone, listening to the crickets hum in the dark. The air was warm, the stars clear and kind. I thought about all that had happened, the lies, the shame, the healing, and realized something simple but profound. Family isn't defined by the lines we draw. It's shaped by the love we refuse to give up on, even when it's been tested to the edge of breaking. When I look back on everything that's happened, I don't see a story about sin or scandal anymore. I see a story about human weakness, and how, sometimes, the people we love the most are the ones who force us to learn what love really means. It's easy to love when everything's neat and righteous. But when life cracks open, when love bleeds into the places it shouldn't, that's when you learn what forgiveness truly costs. I used to think strength was about holding the family together no matter what. But now I know, strength is learning when to let go, and when to hold on with a gentler hand. Layla found her way back